Red-blooded American. I was born in New Hampshire, love the United States, but I 100% see containment, and I 100% see what the Biden administration doing to China is wrong. It's morally wrong. He's oppressing 1.4 billion Chinese simply because they're Chinese.
This is Shaun Rein, an American who has lived in China for over 25 years. I recently had the chance to sit down with Shaun for an exclusive interview. We discuss the state of the Chinese economy and how foreign companies are now looking at China. We talk about US-China geopolitics, the effects of zero COVID, and if the Chinese people still support the Chinese government. Finally, watch to the end of the video to hear an incredible story from Shaun's recent visit to Xinjiang, where he reveals what the Chinese government is really doing to the local Uyghur families in the region. If you really want to understand what China is like in 2023, this is the interview for you to watch. Well, everybody, welcome to the beautiful Pudong district. We're here right in the heart of Lujiazui, the financial district of Shanghai, and I'm joined by Shaun Rein. Shaun.
Nice to meet you, Cyrus.
Absolutely.
Thank you for making time before you fly back to the U.S.
Absolutely. Well, we've had a whirlwind tour here in China the last few days. I've been in 5 cities in the last 7 days. I've come back to China, really wanting to see what is China like after the COVID pandemic. China was essentially cut off from the world for over 3 years. It's now reopened. The borders are open. And, for everybody, Shaun is an amazing entrepreneur here in China. You're originally from the United States. I know you've lived now longer in China than you have in the United States. And, Shaun, our goal with today is I really want to get your insights into the economy here, what is driving the future, and kind of some of your predictions for the future of China, because I know that you were here on the ground through the entire pandemic. You run a company called China Market Research Group, and so you're the man that we want to see and get these insights in. So tell us a little bit about the state of the Chinese economy in 2023.
Well, I think, Cyrus, it's great. Have you noticed a big change since you were here last?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was interesting. When I came into Pudong Airport, I flew into Terminal 1, which is the internationals, and at the time I was transferred in from Seoul, Korea, and there was only 2 flights that came in. And so it was actually a very different experience. I mean, Pudong, the last time I was here, was much busier, much more lively. It seemed a lot more quiet. And then I would have to say the last few days that I have not seen as, the trains and the buses and the planes have not been as packed as you would imagine for, being in China.
And the travel sector, frankly, Cyrus, is probably doing better than just about any other sector in China today.
Right.
But outbound tourism just hasn't happened. And I think, I was in Singapore a couple weeks ago. I went to Thailand, and everybody is waiting for this great surge of Chinese travelers after 3 years traveling overseas. Right. Because in 2019, about 180 million Chinese traveled abroad.
Right.
They were the ones fueling the sales of hotels for Marriott and Hyatt.
Right.
They were the ones going to the Champs-Élysées or Fifth Avenue to buy Louis Vuitton handbags. And that hasn't happened.
Right.
And part of the reason, Cyrus, is China is normal, but it's not normal.
Right.
Only about 36% of Chinese who had passports before have passports now that can be used to go abroad.
Okay.
A lot of them expired over the last 3 years, and they just haven't had the chance to get it renewed.
Okay.
The number of flights is way down. We're only 20 Chinese airline flights a week are allowed to fly to the United States, and only 20 American airline flights a week are allowed to fly to China. That's down from 200 each.
That's right.
In 2019. So it's really expensive. Like tomorrow, I'm going to the United States for the first time since 2019. I'm flying economy.
Right.
2,500 US per ticket.
Right.
And that's what I normally pay about when I fly business class to the US.
Right.
So China's normal, but it's not.
Right.
And this is what's happening with the economy. If you look at it, there's several reasons why consumer confidence is down in China right now and why spending just hasn't happened. The first is in 2022, Chinese faced salary cuts, unpaid furloughs. There's weak Chinese bonuses. So a lot of investment banks like JP Morgan kept, criticizing me. They kept saying, but Shaun, there's $2 trillion of household savings in China that people didn't spend during COVID because they couldn't. Why aren't they going to spend? There's going to be revenge shopping in 2023.
Right.
I told JP Morgan I disagree.
Right.
Unfortunately, I was right.
Yeah.
You see, retail sales have only gone up about 10.6% year on year from last month. These are terrible numbers.
Right.
Why? The Chinese don't feel like they have money. That's the first thing. Real estate is weak.
Right.
So they just feel like their overall net worths aren't there. So they're starting to save for a rainy day.
Right.
But an even bigger issue, Cyrus, is geopolitics. And this is what I've argued for years, that China's economy was weak over the last 3 years, not so much because of COVID. You saw exports still soared. China hasn't lost its manufacturing dominance.
Right.
What was weak was geopolitics. Chinese feel that the United States are trying to contain China's growth, right, destabilize the country, and perhaps overthrow the Communist Party of China.
Right.
So Chinese are saying, you know, the next 5-10 years minimum are going to be a real rough time. As soon as we become a national leader in telecom like Huawei, the US is national security threat. As soon as China becomes strong in cotton, again, 20% of the world's cotton comes from Xinjiang, the United States all of a sudden claims forced labor and genocide.
Right.
When China gets strong at solar panels, again, that comes from Xinjiang, the United States says forced labor and genocide. So there's a feeling in China amongst the everyday population that the next 10, 20 years is going to be tough geopolitically. And that's making them save for a rainy day. Right. And that's why you've seen over the last 5 months, the surge reopening that Wall Street predicted just hasn't happened. Right. Unfortunately, I was right, Cyrus.
Yeah.
The economy is much weaker than people think. I've been one of the biggest bears for the last year, right, because of the geopolitics and the weak consumer confidence.
Yeah, I think that was a very amazing insight there, Shaun. And I think that's something that we, being back in America, we always hear this revenge shopping, right? They always thought that, hey, once this opens up, the Chinese are going to be traveling everywhere. Everyone's going to be spending lots of money. We know the Chinese are incredible savers. Typically, just culturally speaking, they already save a lot of money. But yeah, I think you're right. I think that the Chinese, that's exactly what I've seen, is that it's just not as busy as before. It's just a little, you can kind of feel it in the air. It's just not the same China of when I was last year, 2018 and 2019, and everything was kind of on the upslope.
When Chinese go out and shop now, because they are buying Louis Vuitton and Chanel, so people thought that was heralding in that revenge spending.
Right.
But people, when they buy these things, they're buying it not out of confidence. They're shopping out of anxiety.
Right.
They're shopping because they feel depressed. So they're buying a Louis Vuitton handbag to make themselves feel a little bit better.
Okay.
They're buying exercise classes and Lululemon apparel because they want to feel better and focus on health. They're not buying because they think they're going to make more money next year,
right,
which is what would have happened in 2018, 2019.
Right. People
would buy an LV handbag to show that they had reached a certain level of success.
Right.
Now it's about depression. The next problem that I think people missed, right? You just came back, it's June.
Yeah.
Right? The border's been open for 6 months.
Right.
I just gave a speech last week to a group of Australian hedge funds. They just came back. You saw the CEOs of Starbucks, Tesla, Louis Vuitton, JP Morgan, all came back in May, June. It took them 5 months,
right,
after borders reopened.
Right.
Now you're seeing the second tier companies where China's not a must win for them. They're going to come back in September, October.
Right.
So a lot of the international companies have been taking a wait and see attitude,
right,
on whether or not they should come back to China. They also had a lot of visa issues. It has been an absolute nightmare, yeah, for the people China needs, right, to get back into China.
Right.
I don't understand what the visa policies are doing right now.
Right.
But the point of that meeting is that multinationals are saying in 2023, we're going to skip investing in China. They also make their annual plans for investment in November, December, and that's when we're still under lockdown here.
Right.
So what I think is going to happen is you only saw that FDI went up 2%.
Right.
In Q1 of this year over year. That's anemic because for part of Q1 last year, I was locked down in my house, unable to buy food.
Right.
So when you look at it, I think all these CEOs are going to start coming back by Q3.
Right.
Then they'll decide in November, December of this year whether to invest in China next year.
Yeah.
And that's also playing a major role on the weak consumer confidence, yeah, because companies see they work for multinational, they're just not expanding operations in China right now.
Yeah, now it's a good insight, and I want to highlight just what you said earlier as well with the flights, because they are operating at 10% capacity. So I think a lot of people, when they decided to reopen the border, a lot of people thought, wow, China's open again. Like, let's just everything back to normal. But I mean, even we saw a lot of bearish views, even from the airlines, not opening up, saying, okay, let's wait a little bit. We're going to slowly open this up. But you're right. I mean, it's hard to get here. It's hard to get to China now. It's not as easy as it was, 4 years ago when you had, hundreds of flights every day, going to China. there's just a handful of now, and that's raised the cost. And I think everybody, it's gotten a lot longer. So I mean, hopefully we can see this